Lenin believed in the communism belief of Marxism. He was who started the years of war communism between 1918 to 1921. In the years between 1918 to 1921, Lenin introduced a method to ensure that the Red Army was fed and equipped with weapons and combat the economic problems during the Civil War.
Principles. First, production was run by state. Private ownership should be kept to a minimum and private houses were confiscated. Second, state controlled the labor of every citizen. Third, state could produce everything in its own undertaking and could control the peasants' activities. Fourth, extreme centralizations were introduced. This caused small villages to suffer as they had the right to confiscate and requisition. Fifth, state attempted to become the sole distributor or sole producer. Sixth, attempt to abolish money as a medium of exchange and wanted to introduce bartering. This was because of inflation.
Bolshevik took control of distribution of food. Peasants were forced to give up all their surplus foods or production to the government. These raw materials and food were to be given to the Red Army. They were no longer allowed to sell it for profit. The food was rationed in the cities to deal food shortages. More land was used for growth of food. To meet the expenses of the government to pay back the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, the government printed more money, which caused inflation. The value of ruble decreased drastically, causing a price of bread which was before only 10, now 100. The fall of the Tsar occurred the March Revolution. The provisional government was who took over Russia after, but even that didn't last long as they did not fulfill their promises of land, bread, and free from war.
On November 1917, the Bolsheviks took over Russia. They thought that they were the solution to all Russia's problems.
The Red Army was to fight against opposition of Lenin during the Civil War. The government was successful in feeding and equipping the Red Army, numbering 5 million soldiers. There was food rationing, which was when Cheka and the Red Army units were sent to the countryside to seize the grains. However, peasants burnt their crops and killed their livestock rather than handing it over to the government.
Strikes were made illegal, and strikers could be shot. Military discipline in factories was introduced also. The strikes for food and anti-war communism led to chaos. Food shortages was followed by the full-scale famine, bad weather, and illness.
War communism was a disaster. Peasant farmers only grew from themselves. This led to starvation in industrial cities. Malnutrition grew common in the cities. 33% of the population in cities moved to the countryside. Workers dropped by 50%. Private trade is illegal, but many Russians were engaged to it more than ever before. Factories were producing less than half of what they produced in 1930. Large factories only produced 18%, coal production 27%, worker productivity 44% of what they did in 1930.